Hey everybody, what's going on? Hellmite here, bringing you another video from Grab the Lantern today. It's Tuesday and the patch notes have been posted, so it's time to take a look at the top 5 changes for patch 12.4. As always, I'll be going through the biggest changes in this week's patch, and letting you guys know what you can be looking forward to in the coming weeks. 12.4 actually has a bunch of very small but very impactful changes. It was actually kind of hard to cull down to a top 5, but either way, we're going to be going through the biggest ones that I consider to be on this patch, starting, of course, with the introduction of our newest champion, Renata Glasc. She is going to be getting added to the game on this patch, so you guys can be looking forward to that. I think she actually has a fairly decent kit overall. I do think that the revive is not as powerful as people are making it out to be, but we'll have to see how she shakes down once she hits up on live. I'm definitely very excited to see how she does. Moving on down here to the Ashe buff. Now, this is actually really spicy. Technically, this is a very small nerf to, like, point-blank Ashe ultimates if you're firing an arrow at somebody from less than a second away. This is technically a nerf because the arrow is going to travel just slightly slower than it does before. However, the fact that it now increases up to 2100 range means that an Ashe that is going for a cross-map snipe, or even just a fairly long-range snipe, like firing an arrow down the middle of mid lane in order to ambush somebody there, those plays are now actually potentially viable because this arrow is now traveling at a fairly decent speed. There's a lot less time to react to it if you don't see it coming. It's actually a pretty big change for the overall usability of the global arrow without making her particularly oppressive, more oppressive in lane. So really excited about this change in particular, and I'm really excited to see how people are able to use it to make Ashe feel a little bit better moving forwards. On to our number 3 change here, we're talking about the Alawi buffs. Now, these aren't tremendous buffs by any stretch of the imagination, but I do think they're very nice for Alawi, and I do think that they help sort of refine Alawi's niche as a champion that can be picked to punish any top laners if they play tanks. The attack speed buff, not very relevant, but the harsh lesson buff, getting the 4% of target's max health per 100 AD, is actually a pretty big change because it really means that Alawi is going to be laying on the hurt on champions that are stacking a lot of health. Obviously, this mostly applies to tanks, but it does apply to some other fighters as well, so it should be a very welcome bump to Alawi's overall viability and really help her get her back into the metagame. So excited to see how these shake out. Moving on down to our number 2 change here, it is the Veigar nerfs. Now, Veigar has actually been an impressive champion in the bot lane, hilariously enough, and I do feel like Veigar is a little bit too strong in the early phases of the game, especially given the late game he gets to have. So these buffs, or these nerfs, are aimed at curbing him, especially in the bot lane. This is why he has the base armor reduction. Of course, he does have more overall armor at level 18, but this overall means that he's weaker in lane, and it should be easier for marksmen in particular to punish him with their auto attack harass. It also does make him slightly weaker against AD assassins in lane, so if you see an enemy Veigar on the other team, picking something like a Zed or a Talon will be slightly better. Event Horizon's cooldown going up by 2 seconds at rank 1 is also a pretty good change. I personally max this ability second, so it's not as impactful if you do that, but especially if this is a last max for you, it's really going to hurt Veigar because there's a lot more downtime on Event Horizon if you pull the cooldown, and then you're no longer able to get that for much longer. So should do a lot to help nerf down Veigar. I don't know if it's enough, but it's definitely a good start. And finally, on to the number 1 change on this week's patch, which I know you guys are all looking for, the Zeri nerfs. Now, Zeri has been a pick ban champion in most of the professional leagues that have allowed her so far, and Riot are trying to desperately get her to go back into more marksman-focused, crit-focused builds, because they really don't like the Bruiser build, because that sort of addresses Zeri's very low durability baseline, and allows her to actually be like a fairly standard squishy champion, while also having a fairly good amount of damage. So Riot are really trying to get her more to build crit. There are a lot of things that go on here, but generally speaking, her charge base attack was very slightly nerfed as far as the base damage goes, but it does do 500% damage against enemies below 35% health, so you're really going to be able to get a lot of damage off if she right-clicks you while you're low. Burst Fire lost a small amount of damage, but now its critical strikes multiply its base damage as well, which is pretty nice, and the attack speed to AD conversion was very slightly increased as well. And then basically everything else on the page was nerfed. Basically over every single part of it. Spark Surge has a longer cooldown, Ultra Shock Laser has a lower slow at early ranks, and its cooldown now scales with level, so you're not going to have the same cooldown on this until you hit level 13, because this is usually a second max, or a third max actually, so this is not going to be relevant at all. Lightning Crash's bonus attack speed is now 30% at all ranks. Like, everything got nerfed about Zeri. Now, Crit looks slightly better for Zeri because of Burst Fire amplifying the base damage as well with crit, but I don't expect Zeri to stop building her Bruiser builds anytime soon, just because of how good it is for Zeri and how much it sort of addresses a lot of her weaknesses, especially things like Trinity Force or Divine Sunder have incredible synergy with Zeri. Being able to build durability is really useful for her as well. So definitely, I don't think these changes are going to shut out Zeri's Bruiser build. I think that they just generally give her a power down and make crit slightly more interesting. So if you have incidental crit in your build, you're a little bit more happy about it. But generally, I think Zeri is still going to build Bruiser. And I don't know how Riot are actually going to get her to build Critical Strike the way they want her to. But we'll have to see how these shake out. Either way, Zeri is definitely taking a major power down on this patch. And that is it for the top 5 changes on this week's patch, you guys. Let me know what you're most excited for down in the comments. I know I'm most excited for Renata Glasc, but the Zeri nerfs are definitely going to make a lot of people happy. But let me know what you're most excited for down in the comments. If you enjoyed the video today, go ahead and leave it a like. And if you really enjoyed the video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days like today as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it. And I'll talk to you all later.